Night falls on the quiet suburbs of a small American city. The yellow streetlights stretch along the rows of deciduous maple trees in front of Mr. Richard's house. Mr. Richard, an American man who has been widowed for nearly 20 years, lives alone in a large house with his 2 sons and 2 young brides. That house, once filled with laughter, is now quiet, filled with many secrets that no one knows about. Mr. Richard's beloved wife passed away forever in a car accident, leaving him with 2 young sons, Daniel and Kevin. Time passes. Daniel, the eldest son, is now a successful architect and married to Emily, a gentle and sharp high school teacher. Kevin, the youngest son, has just married Sarah, a beautiful young girl working for a law firm in the city. Mr. Richard's family looks happy and fulfilled on the outside. Everyone who looks at it admires it. However, inside the reunion dinners, each member hides their own secret feelings. Although Mr. Richard is old, he still maintains an active lifestyle, playing golf or tennis every morning to forget the lingering feeling of loneliness. However, every time the night falls, he feels colder and emptier than ever. Emily, the eldest daughter-in-law, is both gentle and intelligent, devoted to her husband, but her soul is full of doubts and ambiguity about her own future. Daniel, the husband, is busy with projects, often leaving early and coming home late, unintentionally leaving his wife with lonely moments. Emily clearly feels the dull repetition of the days living in a foreign land, sometimes longing to live differently, to feel love more intensely. Sarah, the young sister-in-law, is always gentle and thoughtful, but deep down she still feels that she has not fully integrated into the new family in the vast land of America. Each person, each empty feeling that they did not know how to tell anyone, just grew bigger as the days passed quietly. Everything began to change one afternoon when Emily asked for leave from teaching early because of a headache and coincidentally met Mr. Richard in the hallway on the 2nd floor. She had just finished showering, her hair was still wet, and she was wearing a thin nightgown, making Emily look very attractive. Richard's eyes unconsciously lingered longer on his daughter-in-law's body, and a strange emotion suddenly arose in him that had not appeared for many years. Emily felt that look. Instead of being embarrassed, she felt a strange curiosity rising in her heart, and her heart suddenly skipped a beat. The awkward silence between the two made the atmosphere seem thick, opening the door to things she had never thought of. From that day on, the eyes between Richard and Emily when they met became different, carrying a bit of furtiveness and strangeness. Small questions, accidental touches, gradually like secret messages that only they understood. Emily, in the nights of boredom, began to try to play with fire, deliberately making herself stand out more in front of her father-in-law, like a dangerous but stimulating game. One evening, Emily returns to the dining room without wearing underwear. Richard's gaze quickly swept over, making both of them feel like they had a common secret. The fire of curiosity and temptation in the 2 lonely people grew stronger, pushing them closer together through each secret private moment. One day, Emily went into Richard's room to help fix the computer. Her hand accidentally touched his, like an electric current running through both of them. Richard invited Emily to lie down on the sofa so he could try acupressure to relieve her headache, but both of them knew in their hearts that their moral boundaries were being tested. Emily did not resist, just quietly closed her eyes, letting the strange, intoxicating emotions gradually overwhelm her. They shared a secret first kiss, laying the foundation for an unexpected family tragedy in a foreign land. That night, in the warm yellow light, both of them pretended to be normal, as if nothing had happened. In Emily's heart, anxiety and excitement were intertwined, and Richard was surprised to realize that the desire of old age could be revived so strongly. The secret affair continued. Each time they secretly did it, they felt like they were reliving their youth. At night, Emily would tiptoe into the living room, where Richard often sat alone reading, and then they would be wrapped up in secret hugs. One night, Sarah, the sister-in-law, woke up, accidentally witnessing the scene of her father-in-law and sister-in-law being intimate under the dim light. At first, Sarah was shocked, standing still because she couldn't believe her eyes. Emily begged Sarah to keep this secret, but surprisingly, Sarah looked at Richard with a puzzled look, then whispered, "If Daniel and Kevin can't fill the void, can I try?" Richard was stunned. Emily was confused, but in the end, they agreed to let Sarah join in this taboo secret. From that day on, a sinful love triangle began to form in the seemingly peaceful house in America. At first, everything was kept absolutely secret. Only when night fell did everyone quietly enter the forbidden zone of emotions. The prohibition made them even more passionate, like moths flying into the fire of infatuation. Sarah began to find new comfort with Richard, but each time she finished, she was filled with guilt towards her husband. Emily saw everything as an adventure, and it became harder and harder to break away from that sinful passion. Richard enjoyed the joy that he thought he had lost in old age and even felt like a completely different man. But then, jealousy and hidden competition began to arise between the two beautiful young brides. The glances, the insinuations, the accidental touches during meals could also stir undercurrents in their hearts. Richard, although enjoying himself, also felt the danger of this secret collapsing sooner or later. Until one night, Daniel woke up, discovered that Emily was not lying next to him, and had a premonition that something was wrong. He quietly went downstairs and was shocked to witness the scene of his wife, sister-in-law, and his own father embracing each other in the dark. The whole world seemed to collapse under Daniel's feet. Tears welled up in his eyes along with a painful scream. Emily trembled and begged for forgiveness. Sarah stood still in shame, and Richard could only remain silent, his eyes filled with regret. Daniel woke Kevin up, and then both brothers faced the greatest tragedy of their lives. They sat silently in front of each other in the living room, the air thick with tears and resentment. Daniel questioned Emily why she betrayed him, why she chose him over anyone else. Emily just cried, unable to speak, only repeating that she was too lonely and weak. Kevin looked at Sarah, his heart aching like a knife, and asked, "What do you really need that you would do this to me?" Sarah lowered her head, her voice choked. "I don't know. I'm just too empty." Richard finally took all the blame on himself, admitting that he was the one who crossed the line first, causing everything to fall into a deadlock. But all explanations and apologies were meaningless in the face of such great pain. Daniel decided to divorce, saying that he could no longer forgive and live with his cheating wife. Kevin also chose to break up with Sarah, although he still loved her, but his trust was completely broken. The next morning, the large house was left with only terrifying silence. No one spoke or laughed. Daniel and Kevin packed their luggage, quietly leaving the house that had been attached to them for so many years. Emily and Sarah hugged their small bags, walked out onto the porch, tears silently falling down their cheeks. No one dared to look back at Richard. Mr. Richard stood silently behind the glass door, his eyes watching his 4 loved ones leave, his heart breaking into pieces. After that day, the house was filled with memories. Now only Mr. Richard remained with the darkness and endless loneliness. Sometime later, Richard sold the house, divided the property among his children, and moved to a nursing home in the suburbs. He spent most of his time reading, tending to his small garden, and writing letters of apology that he never sent to Daniel, Kevin, Emily, and Sarah. In each letter, he only hoped that his children would find new peace, while he chose to live his whole life in regret and loneliness. The house in the suburbs of the American city was covered in dust, once filled with laughter, but now it was just a cover for bitter memories. After the divorce, Emily lived quietly, carrying guilt, unable to forgive herself for the rest of her life. Sarah withdrew into herself, finding it difficult to open up to anyone else, carrying the pain of her misguided youth. Daniel and Kevin each went their separate ways. Although they shared the property, the wounds in their hearts could never heal. Each person moved forward, but the past was like a haunting shadow, impossible to break free of. Richard, in his old age, still often dreamed of having dinners with his late wife and children. But every morning when he woke up, he only saw 4 silent walls and the sound of old footsteps in the nursing home. The story ended without anyone finding happiness, leaving only bitter lessons about weakness and the price of broken boundaries. If anyone asked why a once warm family fell apart, perhaps the answer lies in the silence that no one was willing to share. Loneliness, indifference, and secret desires all accumulated and then exploded into an irreparable tragedy. The suburb house is now just a shelter for cold winds and memories that no one wants to remember. At night, the old maple leaves rustled as if telling the wind the story of a broken home in a foreign land. In his last dreams, Richard still saw his gentle wife smiling with tolerance, opening her arms to welcome the whole family back. But the cruel reality always pulled him back to loneliness and unwashable guilt. Emily was no longer the model teacher. Her heart was cold. She no longer wanted to love anyone again. Sarah closed her heart, locked herself in regret, only knowing how to look back at the past with sorrow. Daniel and Kevin tried to rebuild their lives, but every time they thought about their father and ex-wife, their hearts still ached as if they were being torn apart. Who would have thought that a moment of weakness could take everything away?